Welcome to Slash Forward. In this episode, we're going to continue in our secondary series with Return of the Living Dead 2, which was released in 1988. Let's get to it. We open on narration explaining the history of 2,4,5-trioxin and its reactification properties. It's believed that all trioxin has supposedly been destroyed, but only because they didn't do a proper head count of the barrels that were under the care of Private Stoner here. We then transition to a quiet morning in suburbia. Jesse leafs through his comic collection, picks the perfect one, and then creases the shit out of it. We find that he's offering it up as a tribute to become part of Billy's club for neighborhood dickheads. When Jesse discovers these edgelords hold their meetings inside a mausoleum, he scampers off, hiding in a nearby storm drain. He's quickly found along with his sweet barrel. Jesse's comfort level is ignored again in favor of some good old barrel action. Since Jesse won't stop whining about it, they basically attempt to murder him by locking him in the mausoleum. Ed and Joey arrive at the cemetery. Ed's there to get some bitchin' skulls, and Joey's there to earn $100 for a hard night's work. When they open the door to the mausoleum, Jesse uses the opportunity to scurry out like a rat and run home. Meanwhile, the boys go out to see about their new barrel and start pressing random buttons as any super genius would. They get hit with the gas, which settles in on the cemetery, and we all know what that means. Things are still going well for Ed and Joey, in all but ethical terms, of course. Since the dead don't need heads, Joey was on board, but he draws the line at fingers, although this momentary bout of conscience is subverted quickly with shiny trinkets. Jesse finishes his homework and looks out to notice the neighborhood boys acting strangely. This raises his hackles, so he sneaks out to talk to Billy, finding him sick in bed, but still capable of manhandling him. Jesse runs off to get the number on the side of the barrel. While there, he meets Tarman 2.0 momentarily before telling him to shove off and heading home. Joey's girlfriend, Brenda, eventually gets fed up with sitting in the van smoking and goes to check in. She has a run-in with a zombie right around the time the boys are having a similar experience inside. With a party forming in the cemetery, Ed grabs a couple of quick Hail Marys and they get to the truck. Back at home, Jesse runs in disheveled and babbling and can't find a sympathetic ear. Lucy actually ends up trapping him in his room. Not wanting to risk missing a single beat from the original movie, Jesse MacGyvers his own escape into an adjacent room with a phone, which he uses to dial the army. Meanwhile, outside, Ed and Joey steal the cable van at Jesse's house and get into some classic hijinks as they drive down the road, resulting in them taking out the phone box and ending Jesse's call. A neighbor comes out to examine the twice-dead victim of their hit and run and ends up giving a hands-on anatomy lesson. In response, everyone continues running, eventually ending up in the same spot, confused and yelling, "Dead, dead, dead! Dead, dead, dead!" Yeah! Ed's sack is particularly active, so he pulls out his evening's wages to both bring everyone up to speed on the situation and force this old finger gag. Ed, you are a card. Thom, the cable guy, tries to kill it like he's squishing a bug, but they're distracted when Jesse gets grabbed. They decide to save him, despite everything, and they run off to find a working phone. Except Thom. He hangs back for no other reason than to attempt to pull off this old chestnut. As they work their way across the neighbor's lawn, we see Billy expire. They make it to the doctor's house, where they try to impart the severity of the situation, and are met with non-stop zingers and one-liners. They burst out of the garage and float down the road in their boat. It's relatively smooth sailing until Ed pops his head out to puke and gets attacked by a stowaway. We can tell he's being choked because he sticks his tongue out. They manage the situation and eventually arrive at the hospital, which is vacant. Luckily, they have a doctor in their party who begins a somewhat standard physical examination, the outcome of which we can all likely surmise at this point. The rest of the gang continues to search for help, but finds the whole town vacated other than roving gangs of zombies. So they make a quick detour to Grandpa's house for firearms before heading back to the hospital, where Ed and Joey are trying desperately to recreate the magic of the first film, demonstrating the impact that directing and editing have on a movie's atmosphere. Jesse wanders off and finds a communications room, but doesn't get far with communicating before he's confronted by a zombie. He blasts it in the face, but this only slows it down. Luckily, Lucy exits the elevator in time to shoot him in half, and they all take turns as they have a much harder time than necessary escaping from the danger. When Dr. Mandel recommends separating Ed and Joey, they decide to go it alone, taking the car. They find the exit to the town barred by the military, and while Brenda is in the process of pleading their case, Ed expires and munches one of the soldiers. The rest of the gang boosts an ambulance and take off. Momentarily angered by animal cruelty, Thom finds his road rage pays off as an abundance of electricity appears to deanimate the dead. Meanwhile, Joey and Brenda's story ends when Joey finishes turning and makes his case for eating her brain. She's not down with that. At first, it actually takes a surprisingly minimal amount of begging before she, much like the audience, just kind of rolls over and gives up. The rest of the gang also finds the town exit barricaded, requiring them to enact their final plan for survival. They go to the meatpacking plant and acquire a box truck to fill with boxes of brains. They then roll through town, leaving a trail of brains that lead to the local power station. They turn off the main switch so they can lay some brain and scatter some errant wires into puddles. Billy jumps the fence, allowing the dead in early, forcing them to retreat into the truck, but Jesse hops out of a small hole in the front, as I'm sure feature is standard on every meat truck. He learns to drive a clutch through a wall and then makes his way to the control room where he flips the main switch back on, electrificating everyone, including Billy. Then the army moves in to take all the credit while all of our survivors continue to rip off one-liners like they're Rodney Dangerfield.
Have you ever seen a grown man drunk?
Don't hit a girl when she's down.
And that was Return of the Living Dead Part 2, The Pale Shadow. If you enjoyed the video, I'd love for you to become a part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.